Chris Pappas, and I need help, okay? Because I can say HOWICK, but I have a hard time pronouncing the actual municipality's correct name, so help me out with that.
Give it a try.
It's Umangeni.
Almost. I spent a couple of weeks in the States and I was Umanenji, so you almost said Umgeni.
Oh, Umangeni. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. But you know, so I should tell you up front that I've been by HOWICK dozens of times. I've never stopped. This is my first time stopping.
And what do you think?
Well, interesting place so far. I have a lot of viewers from this area, and they rave about HOWICK. In fact, I told a lot of people last night that I was heading to HOWICK. Oh, you'll love it. It's amazing. Well, I haven't had much chance to see it. I found the municipal building. I parked. I went and got something to eat, and now I'm here talking to you. But I will spend some time today in HOWICK, and then I'll be back on Monday for a lecture with local schools. So I'm looking forward to it. Well, folks, I first wanted to interview the mayor before he was the mayor. He was running under the DA banner to be mayor of the municipality. And I reached out recently and said, can I interview you when I'm coming through? And he agreed to it. So let me ask you a few questions, okay? So Pappas, obviously, is that Greek origin, I imagine?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Many moons ago.
Oh, so a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't know. My dad looks completely different to me. He's got the dark hair, dark eyes. My sister as well. I don't know what went wrong. Maybe, yeah.
Well, it kind of threw me off. It's kind of a ginger look you have there, so.
Yeah, somewhere something went wrong, but yeah.
But you grew up in KZN, yes?
Yes, I grew up in this town, in the town next door, Moy River. So you drive past that on the freeway. And then I went to high school in this area. So I grew up with my cousin, who's pretty much my brother. Worked here during school holidays to make some pocket money, and yeah, this is where I grew up.
But you didn't go to university here, you went to Pretoria?
No, I went to Pretoria.
Okay. Any reason, the curriculum or something, why you like to go there?
No, I wanted to take a gap year, and my dad said, you're not going to do that.
Ah, okay.
So I applied to 3 universities, and I said, it was a different degree at each one, and I said, I'll do the degree that, accepts me first, and it was University of Pretoria, Town and Regional Planning. Which I suppose sort of
That's interesting. When I was teaching ROTC, our Reserve Officer Program, which is our civilian universities, I was teaching at Iowa State, and my boss insisted that I do a master's program, but I'm interested in Africa. It's an engineering school. There aren't really any things for Africa. So I took an interdisciplinary degree on community and regional planning was one of the subject areas.
Okay.
So you don't find too many Army officers that have experience in community and regional planning, but it's interesting. We have some similar academic background. That's interesting. But I'm not a mayor. I am a judge of elections, though.
Yeah, I'm a participant in elections. I'm a candidate.
Well, I had to run for that office, but now I kind of make sure the polls run smoothly. So you are not a neophyte to politics. You're young man, but you've already been doing this for a while. I think you entered, the age of 25? Did you first start in politics?
Yeah, I think it was a bit earlier than that. When I started at university.
Oh, at university. In fact, Cope approached you, did it?
Yes, I ran as a candidate under their banner. That was in when was the World Cup? 2011.
That long ago?
Yeah, 2011. I became a member of the Student Council in Pretoria. Went on to be the president of the Student Council, and that's where politics started. Not a very good politician. I mean, I come from a farming background, so I'm the first politician in my family, but I should actually say that I'm not a very good politician. That's not makes me sound.
Yeah, that's not going to come off bad.
Yeah.
That's the next municipal election is in 2026.
I'm not good at politics. But
there you go. There you go. You're a neophyte of politics. But okay. So that's interesting. The agricultural background. I saw that you had a portfolio for that at one point, and I was curious about the agricultural piece. So did you grow up on a farm? Or?
Yes, sir. Grew up in a farm, small farming town. Most of my family is also farmers. So yeah, farming is in the blood. Well,
there's all kinds of farming. I was a dairy farmer. We had Jerseys and Guernseys. So what sort of farming did you do?
First we've got a horse stud. So my dad was into horse racing, but on the side there's sheep, there's crops, maize,
okay, so the whole gamut.
And then the cattle the herd that exists. And then other family members are fruits, and they're up in Nelspruit, so it's fruit and things like that.
Sure. So, do you miss farming?
I miss the solitude or the peace, but I don't miss the uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a difficult life, isn't it? The weather can really do you in, pestilence can do you in, and sometimes politics can do you as well.
Yeah. So you learn the patience in politics that you do for farming.
Yeah, farmers definitely have a lot of patience, a lot of faith too, in one thing or another, that's for sure.
So you can't be a pessimist as a farmer. You can't.
yeah, when things go pear-shaped, you have to still be there and handle it and be ready for the next crazy stuff. But no, I enjoyed farming in high school, but it wasn't going to be a vocation for me for my life. It was, I enjoyed it. I learned to value hard work and respect for the land, the environment, and being a good steward of the environment, which is carried through me the rest of my life. So I imagine that's similar for you.
Yeah, and also relationships, the importance of inter sort of personal relationships. You know, the farm is only as good as the people who work the land. So whether it's your farm workers or your manager or your family relations, whatever it might be, I mean, that's also important. You're never going to agree on anything, everything. And you also probably come from worlds apart, you know, in different situations. So that also, you know, balancing that.
For my international audience, things are a little different in politics here in South Africa. Shift a little bit to the political side. So in South Africa, people vote for parties, and so the party puts forward a candidate. Whereas in the States, you file as a candidate. You can do it under a political party, or you can do it independent. But independent's rarely elected. It's usually Democrat or Republican. So it's a little different for us. We actually vote for the candidate. Now, you were affiliated with running for this office because that was promoted. You're going to be the candidate for the party, but it's a little bit different. What made you decide to run for that? Or did the party ask you to do it, or is it something you felt a calling to do?
I think a bit of both. My calling is to try and change the perception of politics so that the power associated with any political office, whether opposition or in government, that you actually use the power to effect change. And that's quite cliche.
Sure, but
you have to do it.
Yes.
And so if you can actually manifest that, then you know that's why I did it. I think that started at university because, as I said, I wasn't a politician, and now, but I wasn't a politician, and all I did was try and achieve what I was being told. Make sure that the libraries are open 24 hours. Cool. I don't care about the politics, but that's what I'm going to try and do because that's going to help you. But then, yeah, obviously the party also, you know, there's a number of candidates. Sandiga, my deputy in the next room as well, he also stood. And yeah, they asked us to stand, saw potential in us, and mixture.
So what was that like, that process? Is it, because again, I have international viewers and they're not familiar with South African politics. So when the party asks you to do it, do they pick a front runner or do they pick a candidate, or how's that work?
Okay, so in our political party, so in the DA,
so the parties do it differently then, perhaps?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
So some political parties have sort of an election. So all the candidates will go and they'll elect a regional chairperson, and the regional chairperson automatically becomes their mayoral candidate. So there's different processes. In the DA, how it works is that there's, in any elected position, there's an application process. You apply, you write tests, you go to interviews, and then you get a performance assessment. So for a year or 6 months leading up to the election, they'll put you under some sort of performance management.
It's quite a rigorous process.
Yes, yeah. So you know usually DA candidates, specifically in council or whichever legislature they sit, are of a higher caliber or quality, than other political parties because we go through that. But for the mayoral selection, it's a bit more rigorous. So the selection panels have, former mayors and experts at whatever it might be, and it's not just general questions that you would get running in a 60-man caucus. It's very specific. What are you going to do to solve this problem? What is our stance on this? How would you filter that in? What does the legislation say about this? So it's very rigorous. It was a challenge as well. You have to go and present something. They'll say, pick a challenge in the municipality and come give us a 20-minute presentation on how you're going to solve that challenge, which it's interesting as well, how they did it. But
no, it is fascinating. And the reason I asked that question, because I know a lot of audiences familiar that during the build-up to the election last year, I interviewed Refuwe and Sheke, who was running for Ekerlin, but then she bowed out the last minute, and then the DA managed to get a coalition together, and it still got a mayor in. So I don't know if you know the situation there, but I'm going to guess they went to the next, in this case, woman up. The phrase "next man up." They went to the next person on the list, or would that be unreasonable to expect that to be the case?
No, so that could have happened. So it would have been one of two things. Either that happened. I'm not sure where Tanya was.
Sure.
Tanya was second, then yes. Alternatively, they would have had a selection panel. They said, okay, everyone who has been elected, apply. Let's have a selection panel, and they do that in the background.
Well, she's having some challenges up there, some interesting times with Tembisa and some other things happening. But let me ask you a question about this municipality itself. Because you've been in office, when did you actually take office? Because the election was November 1st. When were you seated? It was late November?
Yeah, late November. We had to go to court because
I recall.
issues there.
Yes. Yeah. And then you actually have the election inside the council, right?
Yes.
And so, okay, so let's just say December. So you've been here for about 8 months now in office. What are your biggest challenges? Is it resources? Is it community involvement? Is it security? What are your biggest challenges in order to affect good governance here in this town?
I think two major things. The one is access to capital. So we've managed to stabilize our finances to a point where cash flow is good. We can pay salaries, we can pay electricity, everything that we have to. But what is a challenge is how fast you can fix things. That's where the capital comes in. You can only fix so many roads with the budget that we have, but we'd love to fix more.
Sure.
So the access to capital. But we've got a couple of interesting things coming on that will help us with that. And then the other is institutional capacity. So there's only so much you can do with the people that you have, the skills, the experience. You have lots of ideas, lots of things to fix, lots of things to look back at, in terms of holding people accountable. There's only so much that institution can do at one time. So you sort of got to let go of some things and say, well, it's important, but it's not important compared to all the other things that we have to do, and understand the institution's capacity.
Now, I understand that. That makes sense to me. But a lot of people were frustrated and fed up. I'm not talking about here, but I'm talking around the country. I had to drive around another service delivery protest in Northwest the other day. It took me an hour and a half out of my way to go 1 kilometer because we're protesting no water. But how about the community? Is the community responsive? Do they understand these constraints? Or, I mean, because in other municipalities, you don't necessarily hear mayors or members of the council saying, listen, we have constraints. We can only do this. We're focusing here. This is why we're focusing here. Are you communicating with the community, or are you getting feedback from the community? What's it like? You've been at 8 months, so that's enough time to get some kind of assessment.
Yeah, for sure. So one of our sort of philosophies is that we have to take the community along with us. Okay. Number one, it's not my municipality.
No, you're here to represent the people.
Yes.
Whether they voted for your party or not.
Exactly. Once you're in the office, you work for everyone. But more than that is one day I will go and the officials will go and the institution stays. So essentially, this is a public company. They own this company called the municipality.
They're stakeholders.
Exactly. So we constantly give them information. So why is this road not being fixed? Well, this one's not being fixed because you see all the schools. We're fixing the roads outside the schools first. Oh, okay, that makes sense. Why is our electricity going? Well, because it costs R2 million for a transformer, but 90% of the people are not paying for electricity. So before we fix it, we have to make sure take people along with you. Explain to people. People aren't stupid. People,
no, but they're just often in the dark because most governance, not just in South Africa, tends to be intentionally or not transparent.
Yeah,
it's behind the curtain. Yeah, and it's distant. It's not something and of course, local governance for us in the U.S. is, depending where you're at, is quite different in South Africa. I mean, my city doesn't provide electricity. I pay a private provider for electricity. My city does provide water, but it's a co-op sort of activity. So the city doesn't own it, but it's controlled by the city. And my rubbish removal, is private. Exactly. And they're there every time, on time. There's never any rubbish left in my street. So it's a bit different than here. But whereas in South Africa, a lot of those responsibilities fall to the municipality. Is that correct?
Yep. So there are changes here and there, but largely those are public services. I think maybe what's different in the States compared to here is that people can afford to pay for those things from a private entity, which makes it then, it moves away from being an economic service of the municipality that is generally not profit generating to something that becomes a commercial entity, refuse for one in this municipality. Not everyone can pay for refuse. If someone who's living on the bread line or just below the bread line, they're not going to pay their 70 Rand for a black plastic bags. So that becomes a service that we provide. We'll collect your rubbish, we'll provide those bags, just because of the levels of deprivation and inequality. So yeah, I think in some areas we could start looking at things like that. And I think it's Midvaal municipality is looking at some sort of private deal with electricity provision. That'd be interesting. So it's just, I think it's just the level at which we operate in the two countries.
Now, you're recently here. You've just come into government, so this doesn't bear any reflection on you. But when you look to municipalities in South Africa, Midvaal is arguably probably the best run municipality in South Africa in many respects. So you just mentioned Midvaal. Are there good lessons learned from that experience? Because the DA has been running Midvaal for some time now.
Yeah, and so, I mean, there's a number of municipalities. There's Midvaal, Knysna, Mossel Bay. There's a number of municipalities that do well. They've got challenges. I mean, they don't exist in isolation. I think Helen Zille once controversially called people migrants, to the refugees. Sorry, economic refugees.
She did say that.
But the point being that there are people moving from areas that are really badly run, where there are no opportunities, to areas where there are opportunities. And the resources from national government don't follow. So as a municipality, you have to, I mean, I'm getting people from Maritzburg, half of Lesotho lives here, you know, so.
I thought they lived in the Free State.
We have to look at the other half.
The other half's there, okay.
We have
Nobody's in Maseru this weekend.
there's no one there. So we have to look after. I mean, we have to provide refuge and jobs and schooling, you know, all these things that we have to do, because there's more opportunities.
Sure.
So yeah, Midval there's a lot of lessons to learn, and the nice thing is that we are not. When I say we DA mayors, we communicate. I mean, just before you came in, I was speaking to someone from the Garden Route municipality just to get some advice on something there. So we communicate with each other and we communicate the lessons that we've learned. Even Helen, I mean, I phoned her the other day about a protest that we had here. So, you know, I'm sure you had many protests during your time as mayor. Can you just give me some advice? What would you do in this situation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, so it's great. There's not that competition.
Well, I guess it's nice to have that, and this isn't meant as an insult to Helen, but a compliment. But I mean, she's sort of the graybeard, you know. If you know the phrase graybeard, you know, she's the actual graybeard, but she's sort of the graybeard. It's the wise in council. Someone's been there, someone's done that, and so that's kind of handy to have. You've got that's, you know, years ago when the African National Congress took over governance in the country, one of the first things they did was reorganize municipalities, and I told people at the time, I said that's of concern, and I said it doesn't matter who the political party of the day is. They tend to try, once they're in power, parties generally try to ensure they stay in power one way or another. Whether it's Tories and Labor or CDU and SPD or Democrats and Republicans.
You don't pay to come see.
Exactly. It's politics is a blood sport when it comes down to competition. That's now when governance comes, it should be a blood sport. It should be serving people. But no, it's just it's anyway. I'll get off that topic. We'll come back to that later. So I do want to get on something I think is very interesting here. You and I talked just before this, and I mentioned to you that one of the reasons I wanted to interview you during the campaign, when you were incredibly busy, was that there was a little bit of press coverage about you. But honestly, from outside looking into South Africa, the only thing we saw from the DA, and I was trying to get information on and reporting on some of the really interesting personalities like Rafule, like yourself and others, and then also down at Iker and at Nicklin, I was trying to get some information there. But the only thing we saw for the most part is we saw Early B's awesome video, which was really cool to launch a campaign. I'm not sure why it didn't get played all the time, unless it was a copyright thing or something, because I think I played it more than the DA did, to be honest. It's a great song. Yeah, tired of excuses. Solutions, yeah. And then we always saw John Steenhuisen, and that's not a criticism, but it seemed odd to me as a municipal, and you don't have to answer, I'm not asking a question about that, but I'm building towards something. It seemed odd to me as a municipal thing. It's really about local governance, and you want to bring people to your standard. You want the local candidate to come out, and this is where you come in. From what I understand from the press coverage I saw, they said a lot that you were on the ground. You were grassroots. You were in the communities. You were talking to people, and we don't see a lot of that in elections in Africa. So, is that what happened? Did you do that? Because there wasn't much press coverage after they initially reported.
Yeah. So I mean, I think one, our media in South Africa is not as intense at this local level. Mm-hmm. So you see Steenhuisen because we have national covering. We don't have.
And he's the party leader, so they naturally focus on him.
So I mean, in states you'll have your local TV station
and newspapers and radio. Yes.
We have much more limited. So we've got a local newspaper, and you wouldn't get that, so you wouldn't see all that's happening.
Yes.
But I mean, all the other coverage, no, the 54 municipalities in KZN, the radio station that covers the whole of the province might feature you once during the election. So yeah, it's just the scale at which media operates.
Well, was the local media, the local paper and such, were they covering your campaign?
Yes, yeah, they were. But they were covering everyone's campaign.
Oh, of course.
I was in the ANC's.
Sure.
Everyone else sort of didn't exist in this area.
Well, that was the two front runners.
Yeah, well, they come every 5 years, put up posters and leave. So, yeah.
Enough said.
Enough said. Let me not compare.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it was a local election. So when you're speaking about a national election, you're speaking borders and healthcare and taxes, and so there you speaking to people not necessarily in their home about what they're experiencing outside. Mm-hmm. It's sort of a higher level, but we realize that this is a local election. People want to know, when they get home, I can put my lights on and they'll be on, and there'll be water in the tap, and the potholes in my road are going to be fixed, and the street lights are going to work. So instead of trying to, take take a national narrative. I mean, the party has to speak from a national level
Sure.
about service delivery at local level. But it was up to us to take that and localize it. And we do that by speaking to people in their homes, in their churches, in their businesses, wherever they might be, but going to them, because that, I mean, we're local. I'm not John Steenhazen coming
Right.
from
And
Durban
you're
to
not
speak to
you're not provincial. You're here
Yeah.
local.
So,
So what was it like for you? Were you working 7 days a week and going to churches and going to townships and going to farms? And there's some farms I imagine in this town as well.
that's, just like that. And it was just, that's probably why we didn't meet, is just because
You're that
there was
busy.
just so
Yeah.
much happening.
Yeah.
Besides all the election machinery that happens in the background that you still have to make work.
And you were also, or you still are, the deputy leader for the party in this province.
Yeah,
So
so there was all of that.
So you had a day job as well.
Yes. At that stage, I was still in the provincial parliament as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's
So I had that, and that's
So I would basically, after November 1st, you were probably knackered for a couple of days.
yes, yeah. No minute, how many cups of coffee I had, it wasn't going to keep me going.
Well, this election, the one from last November, this election, I try to encourage, exhort South Africans to go to the polls. Now, to be fair, we had municipal elections, well, not municipal, we had elections, which include municipalities, the day after election, November 2nd. And that's when I was elected, judge of elections. But our turnout was about the same as yours, 31%. But the difference is that we get to vote for the candidate. So if we don't like him, it doesn't take many votes to get rid of him or her next time.
Yeah.
So, but I tried to exhort South Africans to go out, and I said that 2021 is a critical year. Let me explain why. I want to get your thoughts if you don't mind, because I'd like to hear it from someone that's actually doing this job on the ground. So I told people, I said, listen, if you want to change where South Africa's headed, and you want people to come to your standard, whether you're the UDM or the DA, or the Freedom Plus or IFP, whatever your party is, you really have to put your best foot forward in municipal elections, because national security, trade policy, foreign direct investment, those are all wonderful, but as you just sort of alluded to a moment ago, that's not what people are looking at when they come home at night. Are the lights on? Did I just blow another tire in a pothole? Is it safe for my kids to go to school? Will the police respond tonight? That sort of thing. And the way South Africa's municipalities are structured with services, as we talked about, it seems to me that if you want to bring people to your standard, the best way to do it is to give good service delivery for what you're responsible for, transparent governance, and engage with the people. And the easiest way to do that, and most effective in my view in South Africa, is the municipal level. And that's what I try to tell people. And people said, no, you're naive. And I said, no, I'm not naive. I get how politics works. And I think if you want to make progress, that's the way to do it. Do you think that's a valid position, or would you agree with that?
I think you're 100% correct. There's so much that your local government can do to shield you from national government failures.
And improve your life.
So, I agree with you 100%. And I think if you look at the Western Cape story, or the City of Cape Town story, is that it started, the DA started with one municipality, it grew and grew and grew, and in most respects, those are the highest performing in the different measurements.
Yeah, clean audits and things
Yeah,
like that.
and it's not because we run the country. It's because you start small, and so then you get to a province, and then slowly you can affect change like that. And the same, that's what we're hoping here as well, is that we can show that there's a difference between here and next door. And then that's a spillover effect, and eventually the province and then the country. So as you say, this is the closest. You don't know who your member of parliament is, whatever. You can't just pick up the phone and pop them a WhatsApp or tag them on Facebook. They're probably going to ignore you. But here, you can, if you're really upset, you can come and knock on my door, and I'll see you.
Or at least one of the councillors in town, or the office that is responsible for whatever service you think you're supposed to be getting, or you are supposed to be getting. So that was the point I tried to make to people, and it's just sort of went in 1 year now to the other year, 31%. Your party, not picking your party, but your party was excited and after the election said, look, the ANC's at 46%. And I dispute that. The ANC's at 13%. 39 million eligible voters, and they got 13% of that vote.
Yeah.
So actually, that's a much better sign if you're trying to compete with the ANC. They're not doing quite as people may think. But the service delivery, that's kind of different for Americans. We're not accustomed to that, and other folks around the world. But here it makes a lot of sense. So what was that like? Engaging. Had you done that previously, going out and talking to people for elections, or is it something you already experienced doing? You seem like an engaging fellow, so I don't imagine it's difficult to knock on doors and say hello to people, or was it?
Before I went to the provincial parliament, I was a ward councillor in Durban.
Yes.
So, I had a small time, one ward, not an entire municipality. So yes, I mean, it's just on a much smaller scale with less responsibilities. But also, I think sometimes politicians, we distance ourselves too much from people. Go to your local pub, sit and have a beer.
Yeah.
With people, ask them, how was your day? What's troubling you at work? And do it genuinely, so you can try and fix the things in the system. You don't have to wait for a public meeting or some formal forum. We are supposed to be part of the community. So go to a church or a funeral or the things that, speak to people. Go to the pub, go to the sports day, whatever it might be, the local market, and engage with people. You'll learn a lot more there than you do sitting in the council chamber or reading a report or whatever it might be.
It'll also be a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Especially if rugby's on.
No, then you don't interrupt people. Then there's no politics.
No, but I'm sure they complain about the potholes in front of their house still do the rugby.
Definitely.
Anyway, do you follow rugby?
I do. Okay. When I'm not at public meetings on the weekend, but yes.
Sharks fan?
No.
Oh.
Simply so. No, I'm a Bulls supporter.
Okay.
It's from my days in Pretoria.
Okay, fair enough.
I shouldn't say that so loud, living in KZN now, but
I was going to say it's sacrilege.
Yeah.
Well, listen,
I'm close enough to Gauteng to sort of,
You're not that close, brother. No, the only time I ever followed the Sharks closely was when Bismarck Duplessis played for the Young play.
Yes.
So I'm a big fan of Bismarck. I'm a Province and Stormers fan, so. But I follow all of them. And,
so you can't have too much bias.
No, it's especially when you're reporting on it. So,
exactly, yeah.
But when it comes to Springboks, I'm obviously pretty biased. So it's my first rugby team. We didn't have a national team when I became a fan, so we got a team a couple years later. So that's how long I started following rugby. So I had to pick a team, and I picked South Africa and stuck with them. So sometimes it pays off. Ellis Park didn't pay off so well a few weeks ago, but
it was a good game.
I think that's a matter of dispute. We'll let that one go. Well, let me ask this question about resources. Are you in some ways limited or hampered by the following? Does a municipality have to depend on resources from the national and provincial government, or do your resources come directly to you, as far as budget and things like that?
Yeah, it's a yes and no answer. So there's equitable share, which is an unconditional grant. It's determined by a formula. All municipalities get it.
So it's a flat grant that comes to the city, and it can be used for any expenditure? Or?
Anything.
Okay.
So that's why it's unconditional. They give it to you. It's based on population and poverty and all sorts of things. They send it to you.
Complicated formula. Straight out you get this.
Yeah. Then there's our internally or locally generated funds, and that's where I have an issue with this system of governance in South Africa. Is that we get very little compared to the value that we add. So our local economy is about 20 billion rand. That's on GDP, but we only get 90 million from the national government. So we generate all this value for the country and the economy, but we get back such a little bit. But we're also hampered in terms of how we can generate funds. So property tax. That's the only tax that we are allowed to charge at a local government level. In the States, you have sales tax and all sorts of things that you charge people.
We have a lot of fees too.
Yeah.
Firearms registration fee, fishing license
and that
fee.
all goes to your local.
Yes, or the state, and then they allocate it down. It just depends.
Not yet. Yeah, it all goes to Pretoria, to some vault, and then we get a fraction of it back. The expectations on local government to solve the socioeconomic issues that we face, infrastructure, whatever it might be, are incredible. Because as we were saying earlier, you can come and knock on my door, you can speak to your local councillor. I can't solve the people coming from Lesotho. I can't solve the other problems that come, but people do come to that first. So increasingly, local government takes on these responsibilities, and you see it in the Western Cape with them having more and more, municipal police, where that is actually a national government function. So it's all these things that the expectations of local government compared to our ability to generate resources to, invest is very limited, which is frustrating.
I can see that. You mentioned that, of course, Cape Town and Joburg have their metro police. You don't have something that here, do you? You just have SAPs.
Yeah, we have SAPs, and then we have our local traffic police.
Traffic police.
Yeah, so they.
Yes, but they're just giving me speeding tickets.
That's it.
I'm just kidding. Actually, I've gotten
see one of the vans, especially on the way out.
I haven't gotten any so far, but boy, I'll tell you what, the traffic police on the motorway coming down there are quite busy these days. Lots of speed traps out
Yeah.
there. And I don't recall that being the case last time I drove down this way.
It's good revenue generation.
Indeed it is. It's quite a good revenue generator. So I'm gonna put you on the spot here, okay? All right, fair. I think it's fair. Why should people come to HOWICK? What is HOWICK got to offer? Why? Because now everyone said, Chris, you're gonna love HOWICK. You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. Now I know you're not just HOWICK. You got the whole municipality. So let me turn around. Why should people come to your municipality? What is there something to see here? Is there something to do here? Is it a good rest break on the way from somewhere else, or a good place to hang out, or a good place to move to?
All of the above.
Okay. Now that's a politician.
No, so I think that in many small towns in South Africa and KZN, it's deteriorated to a point where there's not much to do there. There's maybe one hotel or one game reserve or whatever it might be. But here, there's not. There's a lot to. There's besides how beautiful it is and the waterfalls and the nature, there's some iconic places. There's the Nelson Mandela capture site as an example. We actually celebrated yesterday the 60th anniversary of his capture. So there's places like that.
Well, probably commemorate is probably a better term than celebrate.
What did I say? Celebrate.
You said celebrate.
Commemorate.
No, I'm thinking because that he was actually after in order to take him to the Ravonian trials.
Yes,
this is why they captured him.
Yes, yeah.
So it was a commemoration of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was essentially his last day of freedom for.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, yeah, for 28 years or something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, that was yesterday. I mean that is a beautiful museum up the road if you've got some time.
Okay.
We have great breweries. We have great.
Breweries, you say?
You don't have to go to Cape Town to drink wine. We have wine farms here. Great food. Great company. I mean, yeah. So it's just generally it's what you would expect to find in a functioning society. Is all here, and the people are very caring. It's a strange culture in this area. Where people just give and give and give and look after each other. So it's different from other areas in the country. So
far as the makeup of the town, obviously probably people from all over, but majority it's what primarily Zulu, ethnic Zulus, and are there Anglo white folks or are Afrikaners here or Portuguese or Germans?
So it's about 78% Black African.
Mm-hmm. And that's mostly Zulu?
And those are mostly Zulu speaking. Then the very small Indian population is 3%, and then hardly any colored people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, mostly English speaking white people with smaller Afrikaans communities in different areas. But yeah, largely Anglo-Saxon.
Well, that's the impression I got. That's what I was asking. I mean, first off, the name HOWICK doesn't sound very Afrikaans or German.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a good giveaway. At least
HOWICK and Nottingham Road and Hilton.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't feel like I'm back in the Midlands somewhere. So, council, what's that like? Of course, now I hope and I'm pretty sure that your council meetings aren't like what we've seen in Tshwane recently at Joburg.
Yeah, I hate to be there.
Ooh, yeah. Well, it'd be fun to be there if you're a journalist or if you're a security guy. It keeps you busy. But what are council meetings like? Yeah, because okay, we should say that. So this is the first ever since the new dispensation since 1994. The first time ever that your party, the Democratic Alliance, has won a municipality in KZN, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Wow, congratulations.
Okay.
And little birds have told me that is no small measure because of the personal effort you put. So well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So traditionally, the ANC is ruled this municipality until now, and now they're no longer leading. What's a council like? I'm not asking you to drop dimes on councilors or something like that, but I can't imagine it could be anywhere near as acrimonious as what we've seen in Joburg and what we've seen in Tshwane lately.
I think what helps here is that we have an outright majority.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel sorry for Tanya and all the guys in
those coalitions are tough to hold together.
You spend most of your time managing coalitions as opposed to government services, which is hard because you have expectations from people. Here we have an outright majority. So I was joking with it was the other day. I said it was the Auditor General. I was saying I can understand why dictators get so much done because you don't have to worry about so but here it's so number one, it's nice to have a majority, so you don't have to worry about that. There's no destabilizing force. It's taken a while for the ANC here to move out of that mindset of
and be the opposition.
Yeah, so and they've still got a lot of work to do, but you need a good opposition.
Yeah, to keep you honest.
Yeah. So they're still finding their feet with that.
I don't mean corrupt honest, but I mean keep you working hard.
But that too.
Yeah, but they keep you working hard.
So yeah, so they're still finding their feet, they're getting better at it, but also just, not being able to come to a meeting and when their opinion is heard, then that was must be action. So, they're used to that. We get to a meeting, we say something, and then it gets action. Now they say something, we're like, okay, that's nice, but we're going to do it this way. And it frustrates them, or it has frustrated them, that they're sort of getting into the gist of things. But otherwise, generally, council, we do it quick. It's, the discussions happen in portfolio committees and the executive committee, and it's good. I mean, we don't always agree.
So the work is done there, and then you come together and you get through pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good leadership. One thing I hate is that long meetings go on forever and you don't seem to accomplish anything.
No, and I mean, we also finding our feet as we've been in opposition.
Sure. Now you are leading.
Yeah. So I mean, it's also a mind shift for us, and we learn other things along the way because we've been excluded from the system. That's one thing that the ANC is very good at is just cutting you out of the system. Despite the laws and the regulations allowing you to participate as an opposition, they
find ways to create obstacles.
Yeah. So our speakers finding out things, power that she has that she never knew that the speaker actually had. So it's those sorts of things. So it's same as the man. You learn things. You weren't supposed to do that. How did you get the power to do that? Oh, this is what you did.
Gotcha. But you're not alone. Here in KZN, thanks to the ANC imploding in this province. Now, a lot of people talk about how the IFP, the Economic Freedom Party, did much better. Actually, they gained 2% more votes. So I would say they held their own. Mongos Buthelezi did a pretty good job despite the poor guy getting COVID several times. He's a tough bird. He hung in there. But so they held their own. They didn't sing. But the ANC imploded in this province. And now the IFP, which controlled 11 municipalities before this election in KZN, controls, I think it's 30 now, either outright through a majority coalition or a minority coalition. So they're also finding themselves suddenly in power in places they haven't been for a long time.
Yeah.
Is there any sort of provincial thing where mayors get together, or do you talk to any of these other municipalities from other parties?
Yeah, we do. I mean, there's a number of different mayoral forums that we have, district and at a provincial level. Whether or not they are productive or actually, they're worth anything, that's a different discussion. But you're right. I mean, the ANC imploded in the local government elections to a point where a number of the government's, the government support structures. So what do we call it? The South African Local Government Association, SALGA. So like a union for councils, is no longer run by the ANC. It's a IFPDA coalition-run structure, which means the balance of power across the province has shifted dramatically. Which in 2024, this province is not going to be an ANC outright majority province. It's either going to be a coalition partner, or it's going to be an IFPDA, whoever else coalition.
Well, that's presuming, of course, that the ANC doesn't fracture into two factions and they create yet another party, as they've done in the past with COPE and EFF. So
in this province, they don't learn from their mistakes. So they try to fix their mistakes by being more radical in what they've been doing the last 5 years, which clearly hasn't been working.
Well, you're very generous with your time, and I don't want to keep you all day, but I'd love to keep talking forever. But let's just cover a few more things and then we'll wrap up. So, is there something you can share that when you took the mantle of the office, that, I don't know, how do I say this in a polite way? I'll say this as polite as I can. Was there something smoking in the corner that you were unaware of that you had to deal with? And what was the worst thing that came to you as a surprise once you became the mayor of this municipality that you had to be addressed?
I think maybe not a surprise, but the surprise was in the depth of the blur between party and state. One, and linked to that, is political interference in what should be administrative systems. So, and I always knew, and we know that this happens, but just the depth and the intensity at which it happens. The second day I'm in office, the HR department comes to me and says, "There's these 6 vacancies in the municipality. Who do you want?" I'm saying, but there's an HR process.
Isn't there a process to hire people?
Yes, but
you don't just pick people. That's patronage.
So they kind of say, "Well, there's these 5 vacancies. We put them on hold. We didn't fill them because we want."
When the elections are coming.
Yeah. So who would you like in these positions? And I'm thinking, what do you mean? Is this my PA? I chose my PA. And
yeah, sure.
I chose my media lady, but this is an engineer and this and that. I'm saying, so just the depth of that of the catchment.
There's been a conflation in South Africa of the state and the party, and I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah.
Certainly at the national level, we see it, and provincial level as well. So you say it also is happening at the municipal level too.
You know, we focus a lot on national problems. I mean, there's the Zondo Commission, which
Sure.
talk about the billions of rands that were stolen, or trillions of rands.
True.
It would be scary if you could have the same. I mean, it would be an endless commission. But the worst corruption and anything happens at local government. They've just got bigger numbers to play with. But here, you know, it's over a longer period of time, smaller amounts, and across the whole country.
And the impact is immediate for the residents.
Yeah.
If something disappears, there's no service.
Now, you steal money from the trains, you know, over a 15-year period, the trains, you know, bugger out.
Yeah.
In local government, you steal 100,000 rand, that's, you know, the water reservoir that supplies 100,000 people.
No, there's no water.
So it's you know, and that happens now because you can't fix it anymore. So, yeah, so the blurring of the party and state and just the level of political interference, the issues that would come to me say, okay, well, this is an outstanding disciplinary matter. What do you want us to do about it? And say, what do you need? What you must continue, come to an end, tell us what the outcome is. No, what do you want the outcome to be? And saying, no, that's not how that's not how this is gonna work. So yeah, that was not a surprise, but it was just an eye opener to see the depth of that. Yeah.
Sure. What gets you excited? I mean, what about the job jazzes you? I mean, obviously you seem enthusiastic about the job in a brief time of talk. What really gets you up in the morning? Because I know that I wouldn't have stayed in the Army 36 years if I didn't find fulfillment and I didn't feel I was making a difference. I always told people, I said, I'll stay as long as I enjoy it and/or I'm making a difference. Sometimes I made a difference and didn't enjoy it. Sometimes I enjoyed it, didn't make a difference. But as long as I did one or two, I always said that I'd stay. So what gets you up about, what gets you excited about coming to work?
It is being able to see progress.
Mhm.
So it's hellish frustrating. I think that's my PA there.
Yeah.
It's hellish
So we're almost
frustrating.
done, folks.
It's, you know, there's a lot of frustrations and the pace at which you can change things because of all the issues we spoke about.
Because you want to change it now, but you just
Yeah,
can't.
I want to build that road. I want to fix this. I want those.
Oh,
people
fix
to
the
have
potholes in the
electricity.
road out here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You see there's a patch outside the
I
gate.
drove right by this building. I drove up this Dick Street, I think it is.
Now it's next weekend. It's coming to resurface.
Okay, should
So
have
come
come
back next weekend.
Yeah, next weekend. Okay.
We're actually talking about it now. We have to close down the road. Yeah, but so just being able to see, I suppose, the difference. Just to be able to wake up and know that, okay, well, yesterday this was a problem, and I know that next week they're going to resurface the road, and I know that, you know, we had 60% refuse coverage, and now we have 75%, and next year it will be more. So those are the things. So I have to say it to myself and my deputies, because we're very frustrated sometimes, and it's a terrible week or a terrible 2 days, and there's nothing that's going right. But when something does go right, you celebrate it. Because it's usually much more progressive than those things that have gone wrong. The tractor's broken, so you can't cut this or whatever. Yeah, so it's been able to see the difference.
Well, folks, we're going to wrap up here because they're like literally giving him the hook. He's got to go. So I want to thank Mayor Chris Pappas for his time. It's a real pleasure to get to meet you and actually come out here. And I apologize that, you know, this is a broadcast, so I can't see the chat and see what questions you had. If you are following us in the WhatsApp and Telegram groups, put your questions in there, and I'll try to address them later on if possible. But Mayor Pappas, it's a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. And best of luck here. And I don't know, maybe this will become a bulwark for the DA in the KZN.
Definitely will be.
You have maybe an anchor point here to grow.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, anything you'd like to say to the community or just at all? Or
I don't know, just to, you said it earlier, change is possible through the ballot. That is your strongest weapon. Don't dismiss it. We won this municipality by 42 votes.
by 42 votes.
42 votes. We
I
won
didn't realize it was that close.
So it's the lowest margin municipality has ever been won by in terms of our type of job.
Every vote counts.
Every vote counts. We had, you know, it was because of the old age homes that we won, where elderly, you know, 90-year-old, you know, senior citizens stood until 12 o'clock at night to vote. And they stood in the line and they bought each other coffee, and we won by 42 votes. And every time someone left the line, it could have been 41, 40,
39,
so on.
38. Wow.
So don't lose faith in democracy because of bad politicians. Believe that you can bring change to the ballot.
That's absolutely brilliant. And with that, we'll close. Thanks a lot, folks. We'll catch you next time with Chris Wyatt Reports. Ciao.
Cool.
Still live? Let me shut her down.